Hello, everybody. Welcome to International Podcast Day 2020. Steve, how's your podcast day going so far?
Oh, it's been awesome. Little podcast day coffee, and I'm ready to hear some more great information.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. Hey, we want to encourage everybody out there in podcast land to be using the hashtag International Podcast Day throughout the day. But before we get to our session, I do want to thank our sponsor, Blueberry. They are a great and proud sponsor of International Podcast Day. They are a podcast hosting company that makes podcasting publishing easier with their smooth publishing platform, live customer support, and of course, stress free migration for those that are interested. They do more than publish with Blueberry. You can connect with your listeners, you can monetize your podcast, and of course, you can watch your show thrive. Blueberry has been dedicated for over 18 years to providing the most essential podcast tools in the industry, as I mentioned, since 2005. So make sure you guys head over to blueberry.com, give them a little bit of love. You can see on the screen a little start your free trial as well. Steve, what do you think about that?
Huh, how can you go wrong?
I know. Yeah, it's good times. Well, Steve, we are going to bring in Norman Chella. He is a fantastic player in the podcast space. He is joining us from Malaysia, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Norman, is it around 11 p.m. your time? Is it pretty late in the
It
day?
it is 11 p.m. for me right now.
Okay, so you're closing out International Podcast Day in Malaysia. We are super stoked to have you. You're going to be talking about your podcast is your lifeline. I love it, Norm. For those that don't know him, he's a podcast librarian at Podchaser. He's in charge of organizing, documenting, and crediting every existing podcast on Earth. I wish you all the luck, my friend. That is an incredible feat, but well done. And we really looking forward to what you have to share with us today.
Sure. Yeah. I'm excited for this because I have a feeling I may use the entire hour talking about the title of the talk, Your Podcast is Your Lifeline, because there is a lot to podcasting. The subtle cues, the what goes beyond the conversation, especially when it comes to interactions beyond playback. So once the person closes the episode, what do they do with that information? And the reason why I titled this Your Podcast is Your Lifeline is because I wanted to explore what's possible with podcasting and what can it benefit you with in terms of podcasting. That's why we're going to be talking a lot about podcasts and opportunities. And as FD mentioned before, I am the podcast librarian. My job is to basically help you display all that you do, your body of work, etc., in podcasting to the world. And so, with that comes the experience of seeing so many shows be successful, be not so successful. Shows the different sizes, formats, whether it's indies, networks, high production budgets, and more. And all of them lead to this big word right here, opportunity. So I really want to showcase that. And for those who are, highly into podcasting, maybe this might be very normal for you. But for those just getting started, I implore or I would request that the both of you, both of these groups, whether you're experienced or whether you're beginning to podcast, to look at what I'm about to show you because it is a good refresher and it's also considered a different angle of looking at podcasting as a medium, not just as your show. So let's get started. So I wanted to explore the relationship between opportunity and podcasting because as a librarian, I see a ton of shows. Like I listen to, actually, that's the proper word here, a ton of shows. And in the world of podcasting, there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of similar shows with similar frequencies. And what I mean by frequencies, I mean that some shows have very similar formats, different segments, and some have very similar missions. So to the listener, that can be very overwhelming. To the podcaster or to the creator or to the contributor to a podcast team, how do you navigate through that noise? And that becomes very, very important. So people want to grow their show, but it's hard to distinguish yourself, especially with the similar names, similar shows, similar topics. As someone outside of the space, brands, companies, businesses who want to tap into this, especially for listeners, etc., they might have trouble picking the right shows to advertise in, sponsor, etc. And you will notice that in the podcasting space, there are a lot of people marketing themselves all the time, shouting and showcasing their good work. So it's kind of very difficult to cut through all of that and figure out what to do as a podcaster in the world where we have over 4.5 million shows. And how do you make yourself so unique that you'll be, the end goal here, memorable to everyone that listens to a single episode that you do. So the goal here is to obtain a unique frequency, and um, and from there, once you have a unique frequency, people come up to you, and there may be uh, talks, interactions, opportunities, as seen on the slide right here, to get something that benefits the both you, the podcaster, and the other party, whether it's a business, a brand, a listener, even, or a guest. You want to make sure you have that unique proposition, that unique special element that is that can only be found in your show. So, hence why this word is going to be used very, very often. For the sake of clarity and the chance that I might actually mess up the pronunciation because it is a very long word, I'm going to shorten this word to ops. So, what is opportunity or what is ops? Before we start, though, I really want to define this in the podcast context. And the reason why is because when you understand opportunity, it is almost found universally in any interaction that you do between your show, its parts, and everyone who somehow puts or establishes a relationship with that show. So that becomes very important if you want to say, look at the model of your show and figure out what are some parts where I can monetize? What are some parts where I can grow my show? What are some parts where I can tap into a specific audience? So the application of understanding opportunity within podcasting can apply to all the parts of a podcast in theory. And I say all the parts of a podcast because it's not just the show that you're making. There's the pre-production, there's the planning, there's the production itself. There's like finding guests, recording the material, the interview stuff. There's also for high production budget shows or fiction or indie narrative pieces. There's also finding the music for it. All these elements add up to the entirety of the show / episode, which is a podcast for the listener to listen to at their own leisure. So all of those are opportunities for something to happen. And throughout this, you may uncover these elements. Note that opportunities can be either intentional. So you look at your show and you're thinking, some parts of this could be really, really useful. I can grow it in a specific angle. Or the more that you do a certain thing, the more that you have a greater chance of releasing an episode, which will lead to a thank you email, which will lead to a connection, which will lead to potentially a business opportunity or a service opportunity or something else. That's serendipity. Serendipity is the natural happening, the natural point of contact between two parties to result in something that is very beneficial for everyone. This can take many different forms, but we will definitely explore that later. So I want to define opportunity within podcasting as the following. It is a benefit to reach a higher intended level of the show, of the episode, of X being the party in question, according to serendipitous or intentional objectives or environments. It could be that thank you email. It could be a specific tweet that blew up. It became very viral. It could be an audiogram that you posted on Instagram 2 years ago that is making a comeback right now. And this opportunity, it could be dollars or revenue that has been received for the show as a result of you doing something. It could be the number of listens on your dashboard in your hosting platform. It could be the number of thank you emails or the number of email reach outs. These are measurable, therefore they're tangible. But then there are also intangibles. So intangibles are when you can't really measure the impact of this opportunity that has been given to you. So, impact can be one example. One episode that talks about a specific topic may result to maybe a couple of listens, but the impact of such could be as a result of those specific listens being someone in a very high authority space. And that has resulted in a number of conversations surrounding that person coming up, and maybe some unforeseeable event has occurred. A positive unforeseeable event has occurred in the future because you let your episode out there. So there is impact. Although you cannot measure it, there is impact because they have referred to your podcast. It could be the number of interactions. Although you can measure the number of interactions, it could be different levels of depth between conversations between your listeners, between other podcasts, or between brands and companies who want to sponsor or invest or advertise in your show, or just these other agreements that have come up and emerged because you have been doing your show for so long. And most of all, there is something else called persuasive power. I haven't put it on the slide here, so I might have to define that. Persuasive power is the capability to persuade someone to do something for you, which I will talk about more later in this talk, but I would like you to keep that in mind. Now, these can be measured. Yes, tangibles can be measured. Intangibles, maybe not so. You can try to track them to a certain degree. You can try to trace the source of all these happenings to your episode that you just did 2 days ago. It could be. But one very, very benefit, like one very large benefit of opportunity, and the reason why it is sought after, especially in podcasting, is that it is recognized through the clarity of its efficiency. Podcasting is very unique in that it attracts a loyal audience. When we say loyal audience, we mean an audience of consumers who, through regular listening, has given your show permission to be included in their routine and has chosen with intent to make you part of their life. And that is a big responsibility. Podcasters here know this. If you have a weekly frequency, if you have a daily show, if you have a biweekly or monthly frequency, but you maintain that quality, people respect that. And in turn, they'll listen to your show for entertainment or for being informed or for greater understanding of something. But unlike other mediums, because this medium is a very intimate one, there is a clear difference between how efficient someone reaches their goal of being entertained versus other mediums. And that means that opportunities in here become a lot more larger. They become a lot more effective. They become a lot more maybe long-term in the maybe slow and a little bit long-term in the beginning, but overall calls to action, maybe persuasive like tactics to help someone to say thank you through an email, etc. All of these intents that you may harbor as a podcaster for your show will resonate a lot stronger with your podcast listener audience because they've been listening to you. Your voice is in their ears once a week, once a day, once a month. They want you in their routine and they trust your voice to give them what they want. There are other ways of doing so, but the efficiency of getting a human voice to shower you with warmth and amazing information and opinions and a great conversation, there's a level of clarity in there that is universally understood that ops in podcasting are a large benefit of the medium. So, that's the why and that's the what, of course, but I want to take it a little bit further. We're going to say a little bit further. I say that just out of my semantics, but it's going to be quite deep. So we'll see what we can do here. From how I've been looking at this in the medium of podcasting, there are 4 types of opportunities: intra-op, para-op, inter-op, and a secret op, which I will talk about later on. So these are color-coded, and that's for a reason. I want you to keep this in mind because I will show you something that will be maybe a little bit overwhelming, but I will guide you through that slowly but surely over time and explain each of these terms. The best way to talk about podcasting to podcasters, I think, is to actually emulate or use an analogy for um, a podcast so that we can make parallels between this person presenting, which is me, and your own experience as a podcaster with your own show. So I would like to make this called the podcast cross section, this little diagram thing that I uh, totally drafted and has been thinking about for quite a while, where we take a look at how a podcast is made, which sounds very silly, but it is very, very important when we want to find and discover ops. Let's start off simple. This is a very, very simple diagram of a podcast. In pre-production, the podcaster or the podcast team is planning a show. They want to tackle it. They want to have the show out there and they have a specific ideal audience. And so they execute on this. They move to production. And in production, you have the show. It's being made. People are coming in as a guest. They're getting recorded. Or you have talent coming in, voice actors given scripts to voice out characters for the show. Maybe there are music contributors. Maybe there's something else like some level of reporting or journalism involved. But all these materials come up and they arrive, and you now have a podcast episode or a podcast show. This gets pushed out to past this red line to the public. So this is we all know this, the social medias, the podcasting space, the loud and proud and people shouting out loud about their new show. And throughout all of that, a little piece of the pie are your listeners. These are the ones waiting for you to bless them with your amazing episode because they trust you with that level of quality. And this cycle continues. So starts again for another episode, starts again for another episode, and once again. This may be very simple for a podcaster, but maybe for brands and companies, I think slowly but surely the next few slides will be very, very useful if you really want to tap into this space because it's not that simple. This is the same diagram, but with a few more names and lines and more. So let me look through this, go through this with you. So the podcast team is now split into different titles and roles as defined by your podcast taxonomy, which is an initiative to properly credit and define responsibilities for roles within the podcasting space. So it may not just be one podcaster. There could be a producer. There could be an audio editor. There could be a host that's specifically there for hosting. There could be a booking manager to handle communications for incoming guests. And this is the team. They gather together to make a show and they start making the show. And in production stage, the booking manager handles guests, books them for a specific time, and they come in and we record them. And throughout this time, the host is interviewing the guests and you get this material. And throughout this time, the audio editor keeps track of all the raw files that come in. They put it in their favorite DAW and they make the episode. And we now have a full episode. Once this gets pushed to the public, we now see that the public isn't just one general word. It consists of listeners. It consists of media coverage. There could be, maybe media publications that are interested in your show. It could be different platforms on social media. It could be TikTok. It could be Twitter. It could be Instagram. It could be LinkedIn. These cater to specific audiences. So what can you do to accommodate for that? And the cycle continues. It's just that now that we have more micro steps to go through before we move from one stage to the next. And then it gets a little bit more complicated. So I've added a little bit more. I say a little bit more. It's a lot more. To give you, I'll explain the dotted lines in a bit, but there are way more roles in a podcasting team. There are way more entities in the podcasting space. So a brand can come in. They're interested in this show because they're thinking, wow, they have the exact audience that they want to tap into. What can we do to help the show? Because we want to be mentioned as well. So the brand talks with the sales rep and the sales rep tells the team saying, hey, they're interested in talking with us. And so they become part of the elements of the episode where they go in as a sponsor or they go in to have ads played in the episode as an example. But the other parts are the same. They result in all this material in the production stage, and that gets moved in to the public. And now, not only do we have social media, not only do we have listeners, not only do we have media coverage, but we also have the resident audience. And when I say resident audience, it's defined as the audience that will be loyal to your mission, objective, and values, regardless of medium. So this could be people who love your show or love what your show talks about, but they may not necessarily be listeners. However, they could be given recommendations by other listeners. They could be reading a an article talking about your show, and they're thinking, "Huh, they're talking about exactly about what I like about, so I want to listen to the show." It could be that. And even more so is that there's a discourse happening. So most shows, I always talk about how there's a grand conversation happening. And the grand conversation is this overarching topic that deals with the developments of your topics of interest. So if your show is about real estate in the US, maybe there's a general discourse about real estate in the US that your show could be a part of if you choose to do so. So how do you tap into that? Your show is out there, and can it be included via social media into discourse? The reason why I have all these dots out there is that these dots represent conversations. They represent interactions. The audio editor is talking with the team to make sure everything's in line, and they are working with all the raw materials for the episode so that it finally gets pushed out. The PR coordinator is part of the team, and they have a conversation with media to make sure that everything is okay in terms of PR for the show. Talent is obtained from somewhere, whether it's an agency or maybe it's their website as they're a freelancer or something, and they're brought in to be to help provide their professional skills for making sure that the show goes well. And booking managers are having talks with VAs and agencies, and sales reps are talking with brands. Brands want to talk to listeners. They won't directly go to listeners, or maybe it's part of their campaign, but through podcasting, they'll go through a show to talk to listeners. And these are just all conversations. Everything is a conversation, as there are two parties always interacting with each other all the time. The podcast to the public, host to guest, host to editor, producer to somebody else, journalist to a guest for a story. People are always talking. They're always talking everywhere. And from that interaction, these interactions, something might happen. These are all happening all the time. So if you are into this space, you realize that podcasting runs a lot deeper. To make this show work, all of these cycle all the time. If one of them fails, then there may be a flaw in the show that needs to be addressed. But if all of them are working really, really well to ensure that the show goes on, eventually you'll have an amazing, successful show that is very aware of how itself works. So let's go through some of the opportunities as mentioned before. Remember, these are color-coded, so we'll go through them in reference to the chart that I just gave you. The first one is intra opportunity. So intra opportunity section covers the parts before a show starts. So it could be the talent coming in. Where did it come from? The podcaster that's starting a show for the very first time on their own. How did they get the idea? The producer that's getting, budget for building up a team. Where are they getting that help from? And some parts of these intra opportunities come from how this term is important or implied is that in order for any of these parts to work, they have to have some elements that allow them the opportunity to make sure that the show works or continues or is successful. If you don't have the right proximity, for example, maybe you might not know the right voice actor for your show. If you don't have a large enough proximity, maybe you may have lost the opportunity to reach out to specific guests that are perfect for your show, but you didn't know about them. And on the flip side, we can also talk about those who produce their show or edit the show or master the show or, do leveling on the show. Your show is also your body of work and your evergreen portfolio. This is very, very important because this is how those within those specific defined roles prove that they are good at specifically defining those roles. So the audio editor that comes in for your show may have been brought into the team because they've had proven experience in that specific line of format or topic, etc. So it's an opportunity for people to view your work before deciding to work with you. And for proximity, there are intro ops for increasing your proximity, because in order for your show to go on, growing your proximity actually has plus intro ops for people outside to contribute into the show, maybe new guests coming in. And it's also a great opportunity for you because that's relationship building. Podcasting is very friendly in nature. We like warm relationships where we can trust someone to be a good guest. We like warm relationships where we've worked with someone before, we're starting a new show and we're thinking, I really like that person who did really well editing our previous show. They're great at communication. I trust them to do the work this time. So your proximity and your show as your body of work become very, very important here. And I'm a living example of this because I did 6 shows and like over 180 contributions, in particular for Pod Lovers Asia, which is about Asian podcasting, and Aroma FM, which is about note taking, and plenty of other shows. These are really, really weird shows. They are very, very different from each other. But that weirdness, that quirkiness, was actually my pseudo resume to get hired as a podcast librarian. I didn't have a resume. I didn't have a background degree in podcasting or anything like that. I made these episodes. This became my body of work. That was proof for myself to be considered worthy to join the Podchaser team. So that's a great example there, where your body of work in podcasting can actually be your lifeline. Maybe it will be part of your career. So when you're taking action on intro ops, be very intentional about the kinds of work you want to show other people. If you have a specialty in fictional pieces, narrative pieces, maybe show that more. If you have a specialty in conversational shows about personal finance or real estate, show that more. Your proximity grows and depends on what you are willing to show to other people. And the more that you collect materials for this, the greater the chance of more ops to come in from people that see this and think, wow, you must be really, really amazing. You are totally professional about this. I trust you to do the work. You do good work and you've proven it. So let me work with you. The next is make sure that you're properly credited and documented. So podcasting is a bit of a navigation challenge. When people want to find out who did what, who wrote the music for this episode, it'll be hard to cart through all the noise. So crediting them in your show, in your episodes, becomes strictly important because that's part of your body of work. People need to know that you made the song for this episode like 2 years ago. People need to know that you're capable of doing this and that and there. So credit all your contributors, especially within your show and your team, and make sure to tell the team that you want to be credited and documented. And of course, all of this should be on your website or on Podchaser, which I myself will check if you are properly credited. So let me know if there's something to be adjusted there. And if you're ready to receive opportunities or ops, shout it out loud. Let other people know that, hey, I'm here to receive ops. Let me know. I'm capable of doing this. I want to look for something very similar. Someone who comes across your tweet thread or your LinkedIn post, they might know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy who can give you that op, but they need proof. So you need to find a way to aggregate all of that and put that into a space where your intro op potential becomes very visible, easy to navigate, and accessible so that people can pass that around like a resume. And at this point, I'm sick of hearing the word resume because nothing is a greater proof of work than the actual good work that you do that is publishable and that can be easily listened to. And of course, that adds to the persuasion power, which I've mentioned before, where if you have your body of work ready, that can easily persuade on your behalf that you are worth working with or collaborating with. So let's get back to the slide. This time I've added some plus points here. So talent if they're credited and documented properly, it's a big plus intro op for them, because once it reaches the public becomes aware that these talents are part of the show. They're capable of doing these voices. They're capable of doing the following ABC that is, you know, listenable on the show. Media coverage covering a team can be a big intro op because your name might be credited on The Verge or some other big media publication. And if I look at some other pluses here, when you're shouting out loud on social media of how well your show is doing, that's a big plus point for you and your immediate proximity. This line at the bottom here is your proximity. It is the people that know you for the good work that you're doing. And all of this adds as extra padding to make sure and to prove that you're doing better and you're improving. And nothing is a better proof of work than progress, especially for anyone, regardless of role, regardless if you're a voice actor, a producer, a podcaster. The next is para opportunity. So when I say para, I mean parallel. This deals with parallel entities, players, and more who may benefit from, say, building the episode, building the show. Some big examples include guests. They see a show, they know that it's really good, they know that it's a really big show, they know that it can provide some value to the audience, and then they reach out. They pitch themselves as a guest. So they see a parallel opportunity between them and your show, saying, I can help you with creating a new show. I'm a good guest. Here are my previous appearances. Let's help out your audience. You are creating win-win opportunities for both the show and the guests in parallel because both of them want to tap the same audience. So if you present your guest well, both of them will benefit. Brands and businesses as well, they see a show growing. They're thinking, oh, they're doing really, really well. I want to tap into that audience. I want to place my products in front of their ears, I guess. I was about to say eyes, but we don't really look at podcasts. So I want to make sure that my products and my branding is very close to the success of the show, because if their show is successful, then, a rising tide lifts all ships. My brand will also be part of it, assuming that it goes well. If you advertise warm, wide, and long term as a brand, you will slowly seep into the routines and habits of the listeners of this show, and they will eventually make your brand part of their life. And nothing is a greater benefit than that level of intimacy. But you can only find that in podcasting. So that's something for brands to be interested in. Other podcasts as well. So if they're in the same category as you're not competitors. There are limitless number of listeners. So collaborate with them. They may have audiences you haven't tapped into. So you can probably do something with them, like an episode swap or something, to see if something could result in an opportunity for both parties, a parallel opportunity. So yes, a little bit more on each one. Be a great spotlight if you're a show. Guests want to be seen as amazing figures, especially in an episode. So if you can present them well and you can help them further their career, that will in turn increase the integrity of your show and will make listeners trust you more. So this means that you want to find all the angles to make a guest look really good. Show notes, properly showing what the guest will be talking about. Transcripts, so that one, the accessible element is mandatory, no questions asked on that. But even more so, sometimes people want to take notes on what this person has said. So a transcript will be very beneficial there. Marketing materials, so that the guest can further stretch the impact of their episode that they are part of, so that they can further amplify their audience and in turn amplify yours. Because now for that episode, it's intertwined. Your success is also their success, is also everyone's success. If all that goes well, then you should be good. And as a guest for a show, be a great performer. If you're a guest and you're trying to tap into an audience, that's an opportunity for you. Maybe you've never tried podcasting as part of your marketing strategy, but you're okay behind a mic. You can talk a lot about your topic. That will be great. So you ask them, who's their audience? How's their engagement? How's their community? What are they doing to maintain that community? You're given an opportunity to be in the spotlight of a crowd most resonant with the show. And this is a plus op for you to help the show look better, which in turn gives you the benefits that you want. Like, for example, a call to action to a book that you're selling, or a service, or your company. Speaking of companies, brands and businesses, throw multiple darts to reach bullseye. Let's just say that it's quite a how do I say this? It's quite a challenge to reach very ideal audiences. If you have a persona that you're reaching for, maybe it's a specific demographic of a specific interest, you're trying to think of ways to try to hit bullseye. So audiences or places where that is the exact demographic you want. But in podcasting, it is actually better to throw multiple darts, i.e., sponsor and advertise and invest in multiple podcasts so that the overlap between all of them result in a potential tap into the ideal persona. Some of them might actually know someone who is the ideal audience for you as a brand. So you as a brand, you as a business have a great para op, a plus op to tap into an audience that's defined by the elements of each show on a show by show basis. And something to think about here is podcast ROI. I've had a question given to me before about how do we approach podcast ROI, especially for brands and advertisements. In a nutshell, mapping out multiple ideal personas comes first. So if you expand and then understand that audience demographics in podcasting specifically are very complex, instead of having all your eggs in one basket, one show advertising there, you should have a portfolio of shows to advertise in, to collab with, etc., so that you can figure out to what extent are you reaching your ideal persona from different angles. If you're going to experiment with this as a marketing channel or as an advertising channel, it is better to spread your risk across multiple shows, and then from there you do adjustments. And an even better plus op is that the loyalty for a podcast is stronger than any other medium. I think it was the recent ACAST webinar on Smart Sounds Asia that was doing a survey about podcast listenership in Asia, where 71% of podcast listeners in this region, according to their sample size, have taken action after hearing a podcast ad. Can you imagine that the amount of branding and advertising that you do for a show, 71% or up to 71% of listeners in that show would actually take action, would actually click the link, would actually Google your company name and more. Like, that's a lot. And for different shows with different sizes and different formats and more, you have a lot to play with. It's just more of a navigation problem, and it's maybe more of a risk factor that you have to consider. So my suggestion there would be to have a sizable budget spread across multiple shows and then track their performance over time. So say 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, etc. And you make adjustments there because the medium emphasizes evergreen listening. So that becomes very important when you're thinking about where are the para ops, how long will they take, and how can I get the most value out of doing this. There's also other podcasts as well. I've mentioned this. So collaboration is a win-win. It's a plus op for both shows if you're collaborating. It's easier as well to persuade a regular listener of another show that's very similar to yours to listen to your show. And what better way, actually, for a podcaster to have their favorite host recommend another show for you to listen to? It's like almost like a friend recommending you to go to this restaurant. You trust that most of the time. So if you're a podcaster, you find another podcast that's quite similar to you, honestly, reach out to them because maybe you might get a conversation that will give you a great para op. So we saw this earlier. Now I'm going to add the pluses for para ops. A lot of it is centered towards production and in public. So parallel conversations between different entities like other podcasts, guests, brands now see potential power ops in the public where their media coverage might actually cover the other show. The resident audience now gains access to this new show, or social media and general discourse about a topic now includes this brand because it's been talked about in the episode that's highlighted. And listeners now have a greater level of color in listening to the show. There are more players at play to make sure that this show goes on. The next one is interopportunity. So this is basically podcast marketing. I'm not going to go too deep into this. This is important for entities that have an interest in the completed show and episode. So to give you a nutshell of how I view podcast marketing, there is immediate impact and there's stretched impact. Immediate impact is the impact of your show as soon as it comes out. So that's the amount of assumed impact that the show or the episode is done. But the stretched impact is the amount of potentially infinite impact paired with marketing strategies and stuff like that to highlight points in the episode to go beyond podcasting. So how does that affect discourse? How does that affect the public? If you're focusing on minute 529 to minute 738 of episode 63 of your show, how does that affect the listenership? Will they focus on that more, and why? And these cover things like the public. So listeners, social media, also media publications. They see that your show is doing well. They want to tap into that success because they are also interested in the public. The media also wants to get access to the public. They want them to read their publications. So through shall we say, collaborating with you, that's an agreement, and that can result in benefits for the both of you to tap into the public. And your content itself, this is more of an intangible, shall we say, op. It can provoke, it can change, it can inspire. So the conversation that you have on one episode can actually help with convincing someone, aka persuasion power, persuade someone to go out of their way in their high authority space to make changes that affect some other part of the world. Maybe you have an episode about governance and policy regulations, and that will result in someone who is a very high authority figure actually considering these and making changes as they see fit. But in order for them to arrive at that point, it's serendipitous. They must have arrived at your show. They must have listened to your episode, and they must have thought that way. So the serendipity between them arriving at that conclusion to take that action depends on your show being talked about all the time. So it's opportunity beyond the show once it's completed. Oh. And what this means basically is that you should be a beacon, a lighthouse, to attract the kinds of conversations that you want with the public, with the listeners, with media publications, with figures in the space of your interest, in the discourse. People need to look at you as a source of truth. And when they look at you as a source of truth, that increases the percentage chance of opportunity to happen. It could be one-sided. It could be someone listening passively and they go ahead and do change. But it could be someone reaching out to you that would ask you for a conversation or a talk or a coffee or something. And you may create impact that can be way beyond, say, blasting stuff out on social media where you're just shouting into the void. And no one wants to do that. They want to be heard. So if you are a beacon, people will naturally gravitate towards you. And when they naturally gravitate towards you, putting a whole bunch of people in a room like that, opportunities are bound to happen. Keeping track, of course, of those at the forefront. So maintaining that beacon attribute means keeping track of everything that's happening in discourse, in social media, in your listeners. What are your listeners talking about? What are the topics that your community is interested in? Why are they always so loyal to your show? Do they have interests that go beyond your show that actually add back into their listening experience? You want to keep track of these, because when you do keep track of these, then it becomes very, very important. And it also puts you at the front line, which could be, it could lead you to ops with media. It could be ops with other teams, other podcasts, and other brands. And as mentioned before, especially in an open medium like podcasting, because anyone can listen to anything, your content can provoke action. So if this is what you want, even though it can be unseen, sometimes you have the passive change makers, sometimes you have very active vocal people. But all in all, this is a chance and a plus op for specific topics to be highlighted through your show, such as very challenging issues, very hot takes, let's just say, petitions for specific motions to be done, to be pushed for rather. But it can be done through podcasting. And people want you to do that because they listen to your show. They trust you. They trust your taste of the topics that you pick to go ahead with continuing the show in that manner. So provocation is actually very welcome in podcasting. So I'm going to add extra points, extra pluses. The recording material can lead to interrupts anywhere else. The media coverage will benefit from you having these episodes out all the time. Your resident audience will push your content beyond podcasting. Your listeners will really benefit from maybe connecting with the brand because that aligns with their values and more. And most of all, your proximity. People will thank you beyond the show. They know that you are beyond that they know that you are more than a voice beyond the show. So they will thank you and they might enter your proximity. And another interrupt as well for the podcast team is that the success of your show reflects the success of your ability to function well as a podcast team or as a podcaster. So that in itself is a body of work. This is all proof. All this activity surrounding your show is proof that your podcast team is capable of doing a successful show. So what's the secret? There's another opportunity. And this is when we're going to get a little bit freaky on this because I tend to include quite crazy theories and jumps across barriers. The secret opportunity is what I call cross opportunities. So we're going to break the rules of all the stuff that's been shown before. So far, all of these opportunities make sense. These conversations are talking with each other. These parties, rather. Brands are talking to shows, to sales reps. Listeners are talking to hosts. Hosts are talking to guests. The proximity of an audio editor can be, expanded upon other shows that they're also editing. But what can you do to make all of them to talk to each other instead? So what can you do to make the host talk to someone specific in the discourse? What can you do to make the guest talk to the media publication? And how does that benefit the show? So synthesis between these different actors, these different entities would allow your show to be very unique in the amount of opportunity it can provide. More people would actually come to you because of that success. So if you become good friends with another podcast who introduce you to a brand that can potentially advertise you, that's a big deal. If your editor gets working on other shows and through them you're introduced to another potential show collaborator, that's another opportunity. That's para opportunity derived from cross opportunity. What if brands are talking to other brands and they advertise on shows and they share their notes and they're like, hey, this show's doing really great. And of course, you can find ways to do that beyond just talking to them directly, like, using Podchaser Pro or something like that. But even more so, because we see that the conversations between all of this is ever-going, like evergreen, they're always happening. People are always talking with each other under the shadow of the show going on to make sure that the show does go on. What can you do to break that mold and create something that is ultimately very you as a podcaster? So yes, every entity and interaction has untapped opportunity, and your body of work can be shown to people even outside of podcasting. And that could actually compel someone to want to start a show, so they might hire you. It could be for distribution's sake, your show has been really successful, and proof of that, you riding the wave of success and marketability, has resulted in other entities or brands that have not even paid attention to podcasting as a medium to consider it. So you might create new conversations. A listener from a show might actually bring it up with their company that they work with for their day job and might actually bring that brand in for something else. Or they might even start their own show. You never know. But cross ops can create new conversations, and that's what we can potentially tap into. And oh, yes. And as a player in this space, for your show, of course, pick and choose the right angles of uniqueness. You're not only want to get the ones that you want, like the specific angles. You might think long and hard, and you think, oh, this person might talk to this person. Something might come up. But to do that in many different angles will result in the increase in the surface area in which you could get serendipitous opportunity. And that's natural. That comes up. We call it luck, but to be honest, luck is a skill because it's influenced by the actions that you do. And if you go out of your way to make these connections, if you go out of your way to establish connections, then that feeds into the potential luck you might get, where you doing that can be rewarded with a potential cross op from somewhere that you didn't even know could be possible. Just as how I found a cross op from me just being crazy doing 6 shows on whatever topic it can be. As long as you find ways to justify drawing the line. So if you draw this diagram, this cross section of your show, and you add in the players, you figure out who else could be potentially in there. You realize who's talking to each other. And you realize who's benefiting from what. Then you can start exploring what can go beyond this model that you see right now in front of you. If this is your show right now, then you try to consider, oh, what parts of these have I not clarified yet? What parts of these can I expand upon further? What parts of the podcast can benefit from, say, extra media coverage? Or my audio editor has a really strong proximity. Can we tap into that? Or my talent is really, really popular through social media. Can we do something else? A spin-off show? Or elements of the recordings in the interviews can be used for something that will push discourse, like recordings that can be used to push for academia or something. Or this brand has been really supportive of podcasting. Can we do something beyond with them? Then you will start to establish potential potential cross ops. So producer knowing all the recordings, and they might do something with their leftover material. Other podcasts might find cross ops with your show. Other podcasts might find other podcasts that might actually connect with your podcast. The host, who is the voice of the show, may gain their own popularity and may break off to do something very independent, but they will still harbor the integrity of the show because they are representing it to a certain degree. And that can be a potential cross op. And the brand can be involved in the discourse of something else. And that helps their campaign. The brand can be involved in the social media of this show because it's parallel, it's aligned. So something can happen there. And all in all, it benefits the listeners, the resident audience, and everyone in the podcasting space because more buzz can always help. So in conclusion, I feel like I've talked a lot here. There's a lot to go through, but opportunity is boundless, but it is quite fickle. It's quite picky. We only need to discover its justification. Ops can emerge due to you intentionally looking at how your show is doing right now, who you're talking to, but it can also emerge due to serendipity. You just happen to have tweeted this one thing about your show at 9:08 a.m. on a Tuesday, and somehow the person who wrote the book that you referred to replied, and then that can lead to them being a guest, which will upgrade your show to a new level. That could be possible. But we only need to discover its justification. If you keep doing what you do, that's always great. If you keep figuring out that you can do even more, that's even better. If you can do a combination of both, then that will result in an amplification of all of your activity. And once you notice, once you perceive potential opportunity, find a way to justify it. And this is more for intro ops, but the proven work you can listen to now, so your body of work, can be evidence of what you can do in the future. It can help your career. It can push you for opportunities elsewhere. You might not even do podcasting anymore, but you might do something as a result of your podcasting. But first, document it, credit it, tell people that it was you who did it. Be accurate in this. Be very sure that you are the one who did this. We want to know. We want to know that you did this music. We want to know that you were the host here. We want to know that you did the research. We want to know that you are a podcaster. But first, document it. And for brands and businesses and people in the Power Ops section, note that as much as you have campaigns, as much as you have strategies, there are real humans behind the listeners, like the listener metrics on your dashboard. They listen in their routines on a Tuesday, on a Wednesday night washing dishes, on a Thursday morning walking their dog. There are real humans. They can be reached out to. They can converse. They can interact. They can give you ideas, comments, criticisms, and more. So, podcasters, brands, businesses, whoever you are, you can talk to the people who listen to your show. And that, just doing that, is a potential cross up because that can lead to greater serendipity. You go out of your way to say thank you to them. You reach out to them in your Instagram DMs. You get on a 15-minute call, and they would love it because nothing will warm their heart better than their favorite host reaching out to them for an actual call, talking to them directly. We are one-sided listeners. When is there ever a chance where our favorite show host can actually reach out to us and say, "Hi, it's me, your favorite podcast host. I really want to say thank you. What do you think of the show? Whatever, whatever." There are real humans. Talk to them. Talking to them can bring you opportunities as well. But yes, these are all just examples. Either way, it's all a hidden gold in the crevices and the minds of your own podcast. So all you have to do really is to go there and find out what it is, your unique frequency, your ops, no matter what it is. And I wish you the best of luck.
Oh, Norman, what a presentation. Um, I'm truly excited to honestly see people. Um, I don't say regurgitate because that's definitely not the right word, but to come up with the baselines of the true flow processes and information that we all need to look at, and it is so crucial. I truly appreciate what you've brought to the table today. There's been many questions in the chat room, so it's up to you. But if you wouldn't mind, would you provide contact information if people have some questions for you?
Yeah, sure. It depends how extensive the questions are, and
I think
also I
most of them
probably won't be able to stay up.
are
But
simplistic.
yes, yeah, I think it's best that you email me, so I will put my comment, my put it in our chat here, and they could just probably pop it up on the screen. That's my chat, my email right there. If you have any questions on this, I'm also available to um, hand these slides out for anyone who's interested in mapping out their um, the framework of their show or the cross section of their show, because this isn't a one-to-one exact replica for every show on the planet,
Sure.
but this is a great start, and you can make adjustments over time.
Wonderful. We truly appreciate it. I know it's midnight now where you're at. Not
Yeah.
for us, but I hope you have a wonderful International Podcast Day. And thanks for being a part of our wonderful event.
All right. Thank you.
You bet. Folks, that's going to wrap up our discussion. And we'll be back in just a couple minutes with the next presentation. Thank you.